It's my great pleasure to introduce this gentleman here, Mark Joseph Williams, to you. Mark is not only a victim survivor of clergy abuse, but also a beacon of strength and resilience in the face of immense adversity. Having endured and triumphed over the unimaginable, he has become an advocate and champion for those who have suffered from clerical abuse. Mark's personal journey led him to co-found the Global Collaborative, an organisation driven by survivors working tirelessly to bring healing and justice to those affected. In addition, Mark serves as a special advisor to Cardinal Joseph Tobin within the Archdiocese of Newark. This position allows him to bring his unique insights and experiences to the forefront, influencing meaningful change within the Church and beyond. Mark's professional expertise as a forensic social worker and executive coach further enhances his ability to provide invaluable guidance and support to others on their healing journeys. He possesses a deep understanding of the intricate complexities surrounding the aftermath of abuse, employing his skills to help survivors reclaim their lives and find renewed strength. Moreover, Mark's commitment to fostering change extends beyond his immediate sphere of influence. As a member of the review board for the Eastern Province of the Jesuits USA, he plays an integral role in the crucial task of evaluating and addressing abuse allegations. Additionally, his contributions as a member of the consulting committee of the IADC. Beyond his professional endeavours, Mark is a devoted family man, cherishing his role as a loving husband and father to 4 children and 5.5 grandchildren. I'll let Mark explain the point 5. A talented writer and public speaker, Mark has utilised his powerful voice to shed light on the experiences of survivors and victims across the world. In this time of synodality under Pope Francis, he has emerged as a powerful advocate both within and beyond the Church, tirelessly striving to amplify the voices of those who have been marginalised. Please give a warm welcome to Mark Williams.
Thank you, Simon. Let me explain the 5.5 grandchildren. My son is in the Foreign Service, and he's posted in Guayaquil, Ecuador. And his wife was a beautiful Mexican woman, Kenya, from Querétaro in Mexico, and they are expecting their second child this October 1st. And it's going to be a boy, because we have 5 granddaughters, so we're breaking the DNA of gender. So it's a great joy. Before I start, I wanted to just thank. First of all, I think I have to give a shout out to Sylvia, who's on the Institute staff, who took all of my emails and changes to my presentation at the 11th hour. So thank you, Sylvia. And thank you to Tina Campbell, and certainly to Hans Zollner, my dear and trusted friend since 2019, which was very providential to have met Hans soon after the summit that Pope Francis held to address this issue in the Church. About a month ago, my closest priest friend, Monsignor George Days, passed away at age 97. And he was the oldest living priest in the Diocese of Brooklyn. And he always said to me he wished he was 30 years younger to have lived more fully as a priest under Pope Francis. But I was struck listening to Father Jose Alfredo with his English. I thought was pretty good. I just want to share a little about my Italian. So this is my 3rd time in Rome. And the very first time I came to Rome was in 1978, right around Christmas time. And my friend George Days, Monsignor George Days, was on sabbatical. And you remember, those of you who remember history, that was pretty eventful with John Paul II, passing away, and then the election of John Paul II. So it's been very warm in Rome these last few days, but on that New Year's Day, it was a very, very cold, rainy, windy day in 1979 on January 1st. And George took me to the Vatican for Pope John Paul II's New Year's Day Mass. And afterwards, we gathered in St. Peter's Square, and it was raining, and the St. Peter's Square was just full of people holding these golf umbrellas. Anybody, golfers in the room. And Pope John Paul II came out to the window, and he said, "Tutte le persone and tutte le umbrelle." So I never forgot that. So I've been to Rome twice since that time. This past November, which I'm going to talk about, which was extraordinarily providential, and also right now, to be here with all of you in this extraordinary work that's going on with nearly 200 people here. And I'm very moved and humbled as a clerical abuse survivor to be able to share a little bit with you today. I want to just start by reminding us of Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, where he focused on the story of the Good Samaritan. And it's so appropriate for our work with victims and survivors. We hear from St. Luke, "But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion and went to him and bound up his wounds." I really believe that's why we're here, to bind the wounds of victims and survivors in our church and outside of our church. And for me, the church that hurt me is the church that healed me. And many victims are not there yet. And by the grace of God, I feel very, very blessed to have found that kind of healing and accompaniment with many in the room here from the North American Committee that are here and that I've been part of. And to meet all of you, a very diverse community from around the world. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of co-founding what's called the Global Collaborative, you see on your screen. And the founders of the World Day for the Prevention of and Healing from Child Sexual Exploitation, Abuse, and Violence was the essence of our work over the last few years. And who are we? The Global Collaborative is a survivor-led network of child advocacy organizations, survivor networks, academic and faith-based institutions, and governments committed to ending child sexual exploitation, abuse, and violence, and bringing healing to survivors. And if there's anything that I would like to stress from this 4-day conference that I hope we can continue to pay more attention to as a church, is that journey of healing. We talk a lot about justice, we talk a lot about prevention and safeguarding, and those are absolutely unequivocally important. We also need to address healing. How did we begin? The founder of the Global Collaborative is a dear friend, Dr. Jennifer Wortham, who's on the faculty of Harvard University in Boston, lives in Los Angeles. And in 2016, she faxed a 6-page letter, both in English and Spanish, to Pope Francis. To this day, I don't know how she got that fax number. But the Secretary of State, I believe, or his secretary gave it to him. And he said, I want to meet Dr. Jennifer, he called her. So at a general audience, the end of that December of 2016, Jennifer had the opportunity to meet with Pope Francis. And you can see the gift that she's giving him is a bird's nest. She had a dream that the church was really a nest, like a bird's nest. And inside that nest are victims, and the church needs to take care of them. I don't know how she got that nest through customs, but she did. And what is our mission? Our mission is to protect children and bring healing to survivors. Sounds very simple in the sense of one quick sentence, but it's very profound. Protection of children and bring healing to survivors throughout the world. This is a little busy, this slide. I'll just go through it quickly. But what is our key initiatives? I'll focus on the three at the bottom there, our work. Our work is to create a deeper understanding of the underlying causes of child sexual abuse, including cultural beliefs, customs, taboos, economic drivers, and political perspectives. To educate key stakeholders on the needs for access to mental health, social services, and spiritual care for survivors and their loved ones. And it's interesting, in my breakout groups the last 2 days, we've talked a lot about spiritual care. I thought that was really telling in our interaction. And lastly, to promote legislation to improve the protection of children is really part of our key initiatives. April 8th, 2022, just bring you back to how this kind of started. We held really a global conference. And, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And Patrick is Jennifer's, one of her brothers. She has 2 brothers, both of whom were horribly abused by their parish priest in California. And they still suffer tremendous mental health difficulties. And they're both men in their 50s at this time. But she was convinced through this whole journey to really embrace this work, to really do it on a very deep personal level for her 2 brothers. And it just happened to be on April 8th that was Patrick, one of her brothers' his birthday. And we hosted an interfaith symposium called Faith and Flourishing: Strategies, Prevention, and Healing of Child Sexual Abuse. And the program was hosted by Harvard and had 50-plus global partners, including Hans's Institute, the Pontifical Commission, Catholic University of America, and we had 73 speakers from 20 countries and over 1,800 participants from around the globe. Both Pope Francis and President Joseph Biden sent their message of support for our work. It was really extraordinary to get a message from both of them, which we revealed to the 1,800 participants. And then what happened? Well, on November 7th, a few months later, the United Nations General Assembly held a historic vote for the child sexual abuse prevention movement. And the resolution was facilitated by Sierra Leone and Nigeria. And I know we have some brothers and sisters here from Nigeria, and I just want to thank you. I worked with your country, with the UN, and they could not have been more forthcoming in addressing this issue, particularly around human trafficking of young girls in those countries of Africa. And just think about what's happening in Ukraine now, in the same issue in the world. We can make a difference as a group here because I know we have a representative from Ukraine who was part of the Institute's teaching program, that we could really help make a difference there. There was a unanimous vote in the General Assembly with 118 member states sponsoring the resolution. Archbishop Gabriele Caccia spoke at the conclusion of the vote. He's the representative to the Holy See, who's not a voting member, but it was unprecedented that he asked the president of the assembly if he could speak. And he spoke for about 7 or 8 minutes about the commitment of the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican and Pope Francis behind this World Day. And it really was extraordinary. And what resulted was November 18th, forever, beyond our lifetimes, is now the World Day for the prevention of and healing from child sexual exploitation, abuse, and violence. And to be in that General Assembly that day, and I was with a group of survivors, one of whom was on the North American Committee, Michael Hoffman, who can't be with us today. We wept. We were absolutely in tears. When you saw everybody hit that buzzer and the light came on in the whole General Assembly for a unanimous vote from all around the world, it was really quite an accomplishment for us as survivors of the Global Collaborative to have been part of pushing that. There's Archbishop Caccia there with the First Lady of Sierra Leone and Jennifer, representatives from Sierra Leone and Nigeria, who supported this effort. And I got to meet Archbishop Caccia about a year before this. Actually, Hans Zollner was in New York City giving a talk at St. Ignatius Church in a big Jesuit church, Hans, right? And I just happened to be sitting next to Archbishop Caccia. And we struck up a conversation. And he invited me to come and speak to him in his office in Manhattan. And we formed a friendship. And he said, I will get behind your World Day. And so behind the scenes, he was working it, as they say, working the room. You can imagine how political the United Nations can be. And it was lightning speed that this happened. So I'm so pleased that the Holy See was so supportive. So after the vote, the historic vote, we came to Rome to celebrate. And the official World Day in Rome, and we had a Mass at the Church of St. Stephen in Vatican City, and for survivors, and it really was a beautiful liturgy. It was presided by Cardinal Sean O'Malley, the head of the Pontifical Commission, and the homilist, I think you know, is a fellow by the name of Hans Zollner, and who gave a beautiful homily for that particular day. The next day, we got to meet with Pope Francis, and I should go back just a little bit on this slide. If you look all the way to the left bottom, I had, and I thank Bishop Johnston, who's with us today, and Deacon Bernie, who's with us today from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and Bishop Barry Nestout from Richmond, Virginia. I had the opportunity to address the American bishops at their plenary session in on November 14th in Baltimore, Maryland. And that's Cardinal Tobin, Joseph Tobin, whom I'm a special advisor to, and I sit on his Vos Estes Lux Mundi committee, and that's Cardinal Tobin, and the guy on the right is Bernie. Where is Bernie? There he is up there, and myself. And just a few photographs. We had a gala the night before meeting Francis, and on the upper right is Hans and me at this gala celebration. And there's a few other photographs of Jennifer and me at the UN, and then Jennifer and myself, the founder and co-founder of this global collaborative, both in the greatest city in the world, in New York, and also in the eternal city here in Rome. And just to give you a perspective here, if anybody's ever been in the General Assembly, that's what it looks like. And that was before all the delegates came in. And it looks like I'm overseeing the entire assembly, but it's just the background. Let me just go back here for a second. I want to thank Hans and Cardinal Sean O'Malley, and particularly, and also Cardinal Blaise Cupich from Chicago, who was at the plenary session in Baltimore, and he came up to me and said, "You're in." And I said, "What do you mean I'm in?" And he said, "I just made a call to Pope Francis's office. You're going to be able to meet him." So it really was a collaborative as far as the people who helped us see Pope Francis. And I just want to share something about Pope Francis related to what I said about the Good Samaritan. Before we met with Pope Francis, about 20 of us, a group of survivors, Cardinal O'Malley said to me, he hasn't been well with his sciatica and he had a knee issue, let alone the abdominal issue he just was in Gemelli Hospital for. And he said he's probably going to be in a wheelchair. And I said, that's fine. And we were waiting for him in this small room in the Vatican, and the door opened up, and he walked to us with a cane. And I am convinced that he was modeling synodality. He wanted to touch each of the victim survivors and bless us. And he did that. When he came to me, I told him that I was a friend of Cardinal Tobin in Spanish. And he said, "Oh, Tobin, obispo grandissimo." And then I told Cardinal Tobin this, and he says, Cardinal Tobin said, "That's because I'm overweight." But I was able to give Pope Francis a copy of my talk to the American bishops. And he thanked me, and he says, and he instructed an aide to take a copy. And just about a month ago, I received a letter from the Secretary of State on behalf of Pope Francis, which was really a precursor to coming here, saying that Pope Francis had read my talk to the bishops and thanked me for all my work with in this field. And it was very, very moving to have received that. But various advocacy events equals encounter and accompaniment. He was showing us what it means to encounter that day, what it means to accompany that day. And for me, it was really transformative. So what are our next steps? Well, we are going to host an informal side event during the UN high-level political forum next month to encourage all member states of the United Nations to recognize, observe, promote, and support the November 18th World Day for the protection of and healing from child sexual exploitation, abuse, and violence by adopting national proclamation. And November 18th is really will become a public awareness campaign. So I encourage all of you, wherever you go back to your parishes, dioceses, throughout the world, to remember November 18th as the World Day and to do what you can to support it. It would mean the world to us, but it really is doing the right thing as far as carrying the message for the church, and as Hans said in his opening remarks yesterday, not only for the church, but the greater society. This is for people in and out of the pews. So, in closing, what is this synodal road that we're on? Let me just share a little bit about me and my abuse. I believe the church is the solution. The way back and the way forward. It is the shared suffering of Calvary. Victims have suffered Calvary. We've walked to Calvary. But there is one outside the tomb, and that's Jesus Christ. His Paschal mystery is all of our Paschal mystery, all of our Paschal journey. It is the peace of reconciliation found in the living presence of the risen Lord. That peace fills one's core when healing comes from the deep shame felt, the piercing pain of sexual abuse, a pain compounded by those who do not listen to the voices of victims, compounded by the cover-up, compounded by the lack of transparency, which has been part of a lot of our discussions over these last 2 days already. Many of the abused, and you know this, but as a survivor to share this, many of the abused remain alone, cautious and cowering in fear. What do they need? They need love. God's love. For God is love. We must, I believe, heed Jesus' command. Love one another as I have loved you. I believe this means weeping to cleanse our sinful ways, and as it has meant for me to rise from the abuse, the addiction, suicidal impulse, and only with the gift of grace, I had to create a new heart and work through my excruciating poverty of spirit. In order to do this, I needed to forgive my abuser, my priest abuser. Forgiveness, not exoneration. That's our faith. To forgive in order to go on. To be free in Christ, His servant. It just came to me from my Spanish brothers and sisters in the room, from Spain and other places. I did some missionary work in Guatemala many, many years ago when I was a young man. But a friend of mine there was Jean Donovan. You might remember Jean Donovan was a lay missionary who was raped and brutally killed in El Salvador with the 3 nuns in December of 1980. And Jean and I, she was studying Spanish in Huehuetenango, Guatemala, taking a break from her work in El Salvador. And I got to meet her. We used to go to Mass. And there was a young priest, similar to looking like Matthew, Father Matthew up there, who, I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Nosotros estamos viviendo en Jesucristo." We are living in Jesus Christ. St. Paul speaks to us. Therefore, encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. Here at this conference, going forward, walking the synodal road together. For me and I believe for victims and survivors everywhere, we seek the Eucharist. We are part of the mystical body of Christ. One bread, one body. Thank you.
There's an opportunity to ask Mark any questions if there's any out there. Just wait for the microphone. Everyone's keen to get to lunch or a siesta. So.
It's just a practical question, but November 18th, how was that selected as the date? What was behind that?
I think it was luck of the draw, Bishop Barry. UN has a tough calendar. And November 18th became identified because there was already some things going on in Europe about November 18th to honor child abuse. And so there was just discussion at the UN to make an effort to combine all the interest and the resources, and that's how it got selected as November 18th. And again, it was extraordinarily moving to be in that General Assembly and it was absolutely unanimous vote. There wasn't any dissension or no nays. It was just absolutely everyone was behind it.
Thank you. I just want to add a comment to which was your beautiful reflection on forgiveness and the power of that in a practical way in terms of being able to move forward even in the midst of not letting go, right? Where you remember, but you move forward. And so often, if we're not able to enter into a spirit of forgiveness, the brewing of that, kind of the memory of the harm, can kind of lead to really difficult places so many times. So thank you for that reflection.
You're welcome.
Joseph Stuchli, Czech Republic. You said that a church who heard me is the church who heals me. I think that it's a very powerful statement. And could you elaborate a bit about that? Because what could we bring in our work that would help the healing process? And what was the moments which we should not be blind to, and which are the situations, and what can help us to enable the healing process in the church? Thank you.
Of course, it's a very provocative question and not an easy answer. But for me, and I believe for victims and survivors in our church, wherever they are in the world, what is central is the Eucharist. What is central is forgiveness. What is central is the Paschal journey. And I really believe that victim survivors seek the Eucharist. And for me to be able to share in the Eucharist, in a communal meal, in a faith community, wherever I may go to Mass in the world or in my home parish, is healing. Now, I know it's difficult for not all victims and survivors. They feel re-triggered, traumatized to go back into a church but I think what we need to do whatever we can to remember that they once had the Eucharist meal and many of them are shielded from that for various reasons, whether it's their own psychological makeup, whether it's the institution itself, which we've talked about in some of our breakout sessions. But I really think that's central, and that we do not be afraid, that song, right? That Jesus Christ is our Lord Redeemer, and that victim survivors, I believe, seek Him. And, Father Jose from Portugal spoke about the Independent Commission, and that the 500 victims weren't seeking money. They were seeking an apology. They were seeking an admission of accountability. For me, the spiritual accountability, to answer your question in another way, is how much are we like the Good Samaritan that Francis talked about in Fratelli Tutti? Do we really bandage the wounds? Do we embrace victims and survivors? Even with lawyers involved, even with all the litigious monetary rules and regulations, all that is there. But I think we have to find ways, as it was for me, to experience the hope and healing of the Eucharistic journey again.
I'd like to get everyone to give a warm vote of thanks to Mark for telling us about your journey, but also a wonderful initiative, and hope we can all celebrate that day moving forward.
Please do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.